everyone. How are you all? I hope you all are good, doing very well. So, students, today we are going to start that new chapter, and the chapter name is Where Does Food Come From? Don't you think that it is going to be a very interesting chapter for us? Like, we are going to study about like from where the food is coming exactly, because we know this thing that the food is one of the essential thing for living beings. I'm not talking about only human beings, because animals and plants, they also require food. Exactly, because if food is not there, so that means we are not getting energy to do anything. So that's how student food is important for each and every one. And in this chapter we are going to see that from where the food is come and how, like if I talk about this particular session, that what we are going to study, so we are going to study about different type of organism we are having. Okay, so we'll see that part, that how it is going to be start now. But starting with the session, so I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Arushi Sharma, and I'm going to teach you this chapter, that is, if where does food come from. Okay, so starting with the chapter, and we'll see that what are the topics we are going to cover today. So students, you can see here that we are going to see these topics, that is the grouping of organisms on basis of their food habit, like how their food habits are there, like whether they are producing their own food, or they or the organisms depending on the another organisms for their food. So that's how we are going to see the types of organisms, like on the basis of their food habits. Okay, so that is the autotrophs and heterotrophs. Then we'll see scavengers and decomposers. I hope you have heard about decomposers, scavengers, that if you know that the decomposers, if we talk about decomposers like earthworm, if you have heard this thing that the earthworm are the friends of farmers. Why? Because what happens, student, that they, like if I give you very brief about it, like a very small thing I want to tell you here, that they break down the substances, and because of that, somewhere the fertility of the soil increases, and farmers what they require the fertility of the soil, that it should be increased, है ना? And it's like that, if someone, not exactly human beings, but if someone is increasing that fertility without costing anything, so it would be a g- great help for them. That is why the earthworm kind of decomposer, they are, you can say, friends of farmers. Okay, because we know this thing that friends do something for us and they'll not charge anything, okay, like money or something like that. So everyone knows well. So now students, we are going to see these topics here, and then we'll see that the specialization of teeth according to food habit. We'll discuss about this thing, that how it is the teeth, like what's the specialization of the teeth means. Okay, so don't worry, you'll come to know what like about that in this session only. Then we are going to see about the food chain and the food web. Okay, then we'll see apiculture. So these are the topic, students, which we are going to cover up in today's session. So before starting, so just one question is here. Now, what the question is saying, that why tiger has long and sharp canine teeth? Like you have noticed one thing, like the tigers, they are having that big sharp teeth, and like they are very sharp, like in this kind of, if I am not wrong, exactly kind of nail or something like that, you can say. So why they're having that type of teeth? So students, if you notice that I have shown you that the topics which we are going to cover up in today's class, so these are the topics which contains the specialization of the teeth, depending upon the food habit. So you will be getting the answer of the same question in the same session only. Okay, so just starting with the topics, so I just want to make some kind of curiosity in your mind, like why the tigers are having that type of teeth, why don't we are having that type of teeth. So just see it. So starting with the very first topic of today's class, it's about grouping of organisms on basis of their food habits. Okay, students. So if you notice one thing, like in our surroundings, if we talk about living beings, so living beings are, it's not like that. That student, we are having two main category. If you see, one is plants and another one is the animals. Now you'll say, ma'am, animals, like animals, we talk about dog, cat, or something like that. So where the human beings are? See, student, it's a very basic thing. Like you can consider human beings, even though very small organisms like microorganism, and like big animals. If we talk about elephant, lion, so we all are coming under the category of animals only. It's just that we are different type of animals, so don't worry about that. But the plants, we know that plants are we are having in our surroundings. Okay, and then we are having animals. Now how we have divided them on the basis of their food habits. Fine, students, so these are the division, but how we are dividing them, so we'll see that part. How? See, students, if you notice one thing, that we have two types of things, that is the autotrophs and heterotrophs. Okay, so plants are those type of living organisms, students. If you notice that plants produce food for themselves and for us as well, like for animals, for human beings, so they are producing the food, so that's how we call them as producer, because they are producing food for us, so we call them as producer. Fine. Now if you see animals, have you ever seen that any animal producing food? Yes, we cook food for us, for like by us, by our hand only. But if we see that we are not producing anything, even though when we are doing cropping, farming or something like that, so it's the plants which are producing food. Yes, we are doing agriculture process, but we are not producing anything. So that's how, student, plants are the producers and the animals are the consumers. We are consumers. Fine. Now we'll see that what type of animals, like how many types of animals are there depending upon their food habits. So we are having three. One is herbivores, second carnivores, and third omnivores. So like carnivores, herbivores, omnivores. So what are they? Like what we can say about them? So student, yes, very first thing which we have to be clear here, that the plants are the producers. That means they are producing food for us. Consumers, who are consuming that food which is produced by the plants, okay, in any way. It's not like that in a very particular way, in any way. So that are the consumers. Now those consumers has been divided into three categories. Now what are these three categories? Herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. And I hope like you have heard about these terms like from the very starting only. So the herbivores are those type of organism, students, those survive on plants, like they just are having the habit to eat this food material which comes from the plant, like cereals, rice, or even though plants only, green grasses, so that we call as herbivores. But if we talk about carnivores, so carnivores are those type of animal, students, who depend upon the another animal. Like how they are depending on the another animal? Because they are used to eat flesh and blood, so that's how they are getting that flesh and blood from the other animals. So the organism which depends upon the other organism for their food, like the flesh and blood, so that we called as the carnivores. Now we are having, so see, like if I'll say generally, so we can say one thing, that the herbivores are kind of vegetarian and the carnivores are kind of non-vegetarian. Okay, so you'll say, ma'am, you are differentiating between vegetarian and non-vegetarian. It's not like that, students. I'm not saying that thing, but I'm just clearing the concept that herbivores, which depends upon the plant's product for their food survival, and the carnivores depends upon the flesh and blood for their food survival. Okay, now if we talk about omnivores, omnivores are those type of organism, student, you can say that they are having both options, like they can go for vegetarian and they can also go for non-vegetarian. That means, student, you can say human beings can also be the example of omnivores. How? Because some of the human beings, they like eating dal, exactly, they like eating roti, they like eating um rice and other things which are vegetarian in nature. But as well as they like eating chicken, or we can say other non-vegetarian stuff as well. So such organisms which are habitual of both type of taste, like vegetarian and non-vegetarian, that means they can eat plant product as well as the animal product, like the flesh and, not exactly flesh and blood we are eating, like we human beings, we are not eating exactly that, but we cook it properly and then we consume it. So we are depending upon the animals as well. So that's how, students, such organisms which are having the habitual of both type of circumstances, so we call them as omnivores. That means, students, we can say that the kind of organisms which are herbivores and carnivores in nature, both of the categories, so we call them as omnivores. Okay, so depending upon these food habits, student, we have divided these organisms here. Okay, now the very first thing, student, like if you notice the question which I have asked you, that why the tigers are having that sharp and canine teeth, so that's how, student, you can relate here. Like before starting that topic, you will be getting some answer here. If you notice that tiger, what he did, like for what their habit about their food, So they are requiring some flesh and blood of any other animal. Exactly. So if they're requiring that flesh and blood of any other animal, student, so they are what? They are carnivores. And if they are carnivore students, so we know this thing that the carnivores require such type of teeth so that they can easily tear out the skin of the another animal, because by hand or by simple kind of teeth we can't tear it. So that's how they require these type of teeth. Fine. So we'll be having some more like explanation, more detail about these things. But right now, maybe you are getting that answer of question. Okay. So now we have seen that on depending upon the food habit, we are having two type of organisms. One is the plants and the another one is the animals. And we have seen here that the plants are the producers and the animals are the consumers. And then animals has been divided here, that it's the herbivores, carnivores and omnivores. Okay. Now moving ahead. So, students, we are going to discuss about autotrophs. Now, what are the autotrophs? So, students, if I say auto means self, okay, that the we can see that the type of organisms which can produce their own food, like they are not depending upon any other animal or any other organism for the production of their food. So such type of organisms we call them as autotrophs. Fine. Yes, exactly, student. Autotrophs are those type of, you can say, organisms which depends upon the sunlight. Okay, so for the whole process, if you have heard about photosynthesis process, so in photosynthesis process, student, what happened, that we generally, like if we talk about in a very simple language about the photosynthesis, so it is a process by which the plants produce, make their food and as well as the food for animals. So that is the photosynthesis process. So for the photosynthesis process, student, they require sunlight, water. Exactly. But it's that they are not depending upon any other organism. So that's how student autotrophs are those type of organisms which can produce their own food. Fine. So that means we can say plants are the examples of autotrophs, plants. And we can also say, like, we can also consider them as the producers. Okay. I hope you got the point about like what are exactly autotrophs is. Okay, now coming to the heterotrophs. Now, what are the heterotrophs? So, hetero means like not self, so we can say different or other. Exact word we can use here, it is other. Okay, so the heterotrophs are those type of organisms which depends upon the other organisms for their food. That who like the like the organisms which can't produce their own food, like we human beings, animals. So such type of organisms are called as the heterotrophs. They depend upon the autotrophs for their survival. See, students, if you say directly, indirectly, like the you'll say, ma'am, carnivores are those type of animals which do not eat any plant products. So how they are depending upon the plant? Exactly. See, student, but the thing is that directly or indirectly, if we see, so the every animal or every type of animal, whether it is carnivore, omnivore, or herbivore, so they are depending upon the plants only. How? So we'll see that part in food chain and food web. So don't worry about it, but the heterotrophs are those type of organisms which cannot produce their own food. They require any other organism to make their food for their survival. That's why, student, if you noticed, we have called them consumers because we just consume. Okay, so that is the thing, students, about autotrophs and the heterotrophs. Fine, fine. I hope you got the point about autotrophs and heterotrophs. Now, as I've told you, like how if we talk about carnivores, so they are depending upon the plants or not. See, students, like just take a very simple example here. Here it is a tiger. Let's say it's a whole jungle. Jungle, that means we can say forest. Hmm. And in that forest, we are having one river. Chalo. Now here it is a river. Fine. Just imagine, like we are just imagining one situation. Here's the tiger, and here one, what we can say, deer, deer or goat. You'll say, mom, like in forest we generally find out wild animals. Okay, but no problem, goat can also be there, na. And see, student, goat is a type of animal which depends upon the plants. They just eat green grass or plants or something like that, so they are herbivores in nature. Fine, students. So now the goat is here and near the river. Now tiger is there. Now he's observing that God is there. Now like he's feeling some kind of hungry, and it's like he's having water in his mouth. Similarly, like whenever we see our our favorite food, so we are having water in our mouth, exactly. So that the same thing has happened here. So now tiger comes near to this god and consume God. Okay. But how? Like you'll say, ma'am, why you are explaining this thing right now here? So see, student, if God is a type of herbivore, so that means they are taking plants for their food survival. If the plants are not there, and if the plants are not there, so definitely God will be not there, and gods are not there, herbivores are not there, so definitely tigers can't survive. So similarly, students, if you see that the tigers, or if we say carnivores or omnivores, so we are directly or indirectly depending upon the plants only. So that's how student plants like you can say that the plants are now the major one, like which produce food, or you can say which act as a food for other animals as well. Fine. So that's how student, whether we talk about the animals like carnivores or omnivores, so we are directly or indirectly depending upon the plants only. Okay. So that's why student, whole category of the animals are considered as the consumers, and the plants are considered as the producers. Okay. Fine. Now coming to the different type of animals. So these are the type of animals which we call as scavengers. Now, what are the scavengers, students? So, see, students, okay, we have talked about herbivores, carnivores, omnivores. Now, there is one particular type of animals that we call as scavengers. Now, what are the scavengers, students? So, scavengers are those type of animals which consume dead organisms that have died because of any other cause than the predation. Okay, see, student, what happened that okay, we have hunting was a very common thing, like not nowadays because hunting is banned, if we see in some of the areas, and so I don't know exactly. So it's just that student, so if any other animal, like because of any other cause, like because of any illness or disease, if that animal died, so what happened, these type of animals that they consume over those dead organisms, and those type of animals which are consuming the dead organisms, like they are they like the flesh and blood of that dead organism, so we call them as the scavengers. Fine. So you can see here, students, like the scavengers examples are vultures can be the examples of it. So you can see here, students, that these are the kind of scavengers, and they are consuming over this dead organism, and you can see that from the skeleton part only, like if you observe, so it is a kind of the skeleton of an animal which is big in size, exactly. It's not a type of animal which is very small or something like that. So if you see from the skeleton side, so you can imagine that the size of that animal is somewhat big. So they are feeding over that dead organism because they are used to it. So the organism or the type of the animals which depends upon the flesh and blood of the dead organism, or which or you can say which consume the flesh and blood of the dead organisms, that we called as the scavengers. Fine, students. Okay. Now coming to the another type of organisms. So these are the decomposers. So decomposers are very small in size. Like even though if you see by with your naked eye, so you are not able to observe them exactly because they are very small. Now what are the decomposers? So these are the organism students that break down the dead or decaying organism. How? See, they consume dead plants and animals and decompose them, reduces them to the simpler form of matter. How? See, student, like that generally these decomposers are present in soil. Generally if we talk about like a decomposition process, we can consider here. Okay, so what they do, students, like the organic matter, students, we can consider it as dead plants and animals. Okay, dead plants and animals, let's say these dead plants and animals are present in soil. So these decomposer students, what they do the decomposition process. In that decomposition process, what happened, that they break down the big organic matter into the simpler form. simpler form, and because of that student, this simpler form get mixed with the soil, and that's how student we, like you can say that they are reducing the size of that organic matter. Fine. So the type of the organisms which break down the dead or decaying organisms which are organic in nature to produce them, or to reduce them to the simpler form of matter, that we called as the decomposers. Fine. Even the students, what you can do, you can do one activity at your home. What? You can collect some vegetable peels. Okay, vegetable peels. And what you can do, like there, if there is a soil, in that soil you can make one pit. Okay, in that pit, student, what you can do, you can put these vegetable peels and then cover that pit. Fine. After some time, students, like if I say after one, not exactly one day, 2 3 4, like I'll give you, okay, 1 week, like take 1 week for that. Okay, after 1 week, student, if you open that pit again, you will be finding that the proper vegetable peels which you have put in that pit, so they are not present in exact form. They are, like you can say that they are converting into the very small particles. So how they are getting converting into that form? Because of the decomposers present in the soil. Because, like, see student, that the vegetable peels are not of any use, they are naturally dead in nature, exactly, but they are organic in nature. So that's how student decomposers decompose that vegetable peels and convert them into the simpler form. That's how the decomposition process takes out, and these type of organisms are called as the decomposers. Fine. So till now, student, we have studied about exactly some type of organisms: autotrophs, which can produce their own food; heterotrophs, which depends upon the other organisms for their food; and then if we talk about scavengers, so scavengers are also depending upon the other animals, but it's just that they just consume the flesh and blood of the dead organism. Now if we talk about decomposers, so decomposers are those type of organisms which break down the dead or decaying part, or decaying organisms, or we can say that the organic matter, into the simpler forms. Fine. So that's the whole thing about the type of organism. Now moving ahead here, because we have discussed about the organisms depending upon their food habit. So now talking about the specialization of teeth, like we can observe student that the different animals are having different types of teeth. Exactly. So why they are having that? Because of the food habit. Fine students, if you see the herbivores, they are generally having typical chisel like incisors, large and flat premolars and molars for chewing plants, while their canines are small. Their canines are small. If you see that their canines are small, now why they are having that canines small? Because student, as you have noticed, like we have discussed one of the question, that the canines, the tigers are having large canines because they have to tear out the skin of any other animal, exactly. But the herbivores, we just like, they just having the habit to chew plants, and for that they don't require that large canine shape. Because of that student, the canines shape of the herbivores are small. Fine. So that's how student herbivores are having this type of teeth. But now if you look at the teeth for the carnivores, so you can see here student that this tiger, I don't, like, I can't actually see that if it is a tiger or cheetah or whatever, but it is a kind of carnivore animal only. So you can see here student that okay, just give me a second. So you can see here that the teeth, it like so sharp and big, you can see so sharp and big. So why they are having? Because they have to tear the skin of any other animal, and tearing of the skin of any other animal is not that much easy that by using hand they can do it. No, even though if you have noticed their nails, they are also very sharp because they have to do that thing, no? So that they can survive, they can take their food. So carnivores are those type of animals. Most carnivores have long, sharp teeth adapted to ripping, tearing, or cutting flesh. The most important teeth for carnivores are their long, sharp canine teeth. If they are not having such type of teeth, students, so how they are going to tear other animal? I can feel that the tearing of other animal is not a good thing. But what we can do? Every human being, not only human being but every living organism has to survive, and for their survival they require food. So it's like that it's their habit, na? Like they can't eat plants. So that's how student carnivores are those type of animals which depends on other animals so that they can survive for their food. And for that student, they are having these type of teeth that which are very long and sharp in nature, so that they can easily tear out the skin of the other animal and they can consume their flesh and blood. Sorry, you'll say, ma'am, why are I pronouncing pronouncing blood as always blad. Actually, it happened sometimes with me. So just ignore it. Now, coming to the omnivores. So you can see here, student, that in the case of omnivores, you can see that it is a buccal cavity. It is a type of teeth that all human beings are having in general. Okay, so you can see here, students, that all of them are very much precisely arranged. Why? Because omnivores are those type of organisms, if you remember, that they are having the ability to eat any any organism, like whether the plants or the other animals. So that's how student omnivores are having such type of teeth. And you can see here, an omnivore is an animal that has the ability to eat and survive on both plant and animal matter. So that's how depending upon the food habit of different organisms, we are having different type of the teeth. So students, you can imagine na, like how God has created us. Like you'll say, ma'am, how do you know that God has created us? Because I don't know, like whether what's the theory behind it. But see, it's a very good thing na? Like if you observe one thing, that okay, omnivores are having these type of teeth, carnivores are having large canine shape. If we are not having such type of teeth, so how we are going to survive? Exactly, because we are not consuming food, so we can't survive. So that's how you can see, student, depending upon the condition, we are having each and everything according to that. Okay, so we have seen the specialization of the teeth, and right now you will be having the answer of the very first question, which we have started, which we have asked in the very starting of this session. Exactly. Okay, now it's a very important topic. Now you'll say, ma'am, why it is important? Because students, this food chain and food web is going to be help you to your in your higher classes as well. Fine. So till now we have studied about the type of organism. We have seen the specialization of the teeth, but now we are going to look at the food chain and the food web. So in a very simple language, if I want to tell you that what is food chain or a food web, students. So food chain. Just a second. Yeah, everything is fine. Actually, I thought that I have muted my mic, and but now everything is fine. So yeah, so I was talking about food chain. So food chain, student, that means food is transferring from like in a very simple language, if we say, from one organism to the another organism, and when those food chain connected with each other and form a kind of network that we called as food web. If you remember that this food web. Okay, that means network is there. So food chain is a linear network of links, and when you can see that the networks are like connecting together, so we called it as the food web. Starting from the producer, because if the producers are not there, so how we are consuming them? Okay, producers such as grass, trees, which use radiation from the sun to make their food. Exactly. I have told you this thing that the plants require sunlight for their photosynthesis process. And that's how student food chain starts from the producers, like where they, like if we talk about any food chain, so they just start from the producer and ending at the apex predator. Apex predator, that means after that you will be seeing that they are the last one to consume anything. So that's how we'll see that part, how it is. Apex predators, especially like grizzly bears or killer whales. So that's how student the food chain are. So for that we are going to see one video. So don't worry about that. So this is the food chain, and now in this food chain, if you observe one thing, so this is a producer. That means it is a plant, and this plant consumes sunlight. Exactly, sunlight, so that they can produce food. Now, this plant has been consumed by the herbivore type of animal, and those herbivore type of animal which is consuming it for the very first time, we call it as the primary consumer. Now, this primary consumer, that it is herbivorous in nature, student, so that has been consumed by the carnivores. Exactly. Now it is consuming the second one, so that's why we call it as the secondary consumer. Now, this secondary consumer, when it died, so either it can be consumed by the scavengers, like as we have seen that the animals which has been died like without any predation or because of any other reason, so those that organisms are consumed by the scavengers. So that's how student, either they can consumed by the scavengers or they can just get decomposed in the soil. So that's how student, you can see that it is a kind of the food chain, because when it is going to be break down by the decomposer, so that is going to be mixed up in the soil only, and that is used up by the plant. So that's how the whole process goes on, and that is how we call it as the food chain. Now when this food chain is connected with another food chain, so that means they are making a kind of network which we called as the food web. Fine. So for that I'm going to show you one video here. So just look at it. So students, now we know this thing that every organ depends upon the food for their survival, but how we are getting it? So now you will see that we are going to see about the food chain and the food web. Okay, so just observe it very carefully. So if you students, if you noticed here that what is going on exactly is that here is a sun. The sunlight has been used up by the plants to produce their food. Exactly, plants are growing up because sunlight is also helping them to grow up. Exactly. So whether it is a grass or something like plant as there, so we can see here that these are the producers. Now this producer has been consumed by the grasshopper. So the very first time it is consumed by the grasshopper, so we are calling it as primary consumer. Now this primary consumer was consumed by the frog, so that means now it is called as the secondary consumer. So that's a student, when the level is increasing, so we are increasing like we are changing their name as well. The very first is called as the primary, the second one is calling as the secondary. Now when this frog is eaten up by the snake or snake, so that's how it comes it called as the tertiary consumer. Now this snake has been consumed by the, you can see here students, you can see here that it is eaten up by the scavenger type of organs. So we call them as the quaternary consumers. So that's how students, starting from the producers to the quaternary consumer. So this is a series of organisms which you can see here, that which depends upon the other organisms. So that's how a food chain formed. So we can see here. So, students, a series of organisms that eat one another, resulting in the flow of energy. Like how the flow of energy is getting, you can say, sun sunlight is giving its energy to the plants. Now the plants has been consumed by the grasshopper. So that's how student energy is transforming from one organism to the another organism. So when the series of the organisms is there and they are eating up, like you can see, like they are eating one another, and which result in the flow of energy from one organism to the another organism. So such we called as the food chain. Fine. But it's just that on the different level we call them as the different consumers. How? That initially grasshopper is eating plants, so that's how we call them as primary consumer. Then the grasshopper has been eaten up by the frog, so that's how we calling it as secondary consumer, depending upon it. Okay. So that is the food chain. See, student, it's not like that one particular animal is a food of any other animal. Okay, it could be possibility that one animal can be a food for any other two type of animals. Okay, so that's how we can also having one food chain. So you can see here. So student, because of that, like the earthworm is eaten up by both of them, like hen and frog, and hen also eat grass. So grass, or you can say that grains. So because of that, student, that how the food chains are interconnecting with each other, and I have already told you that when the food chain form a kind of network, that we called it as the food web. Fine. So, students, like here we can see that the type of the consumer, like the driving force is the sun. Now, the plants are the producer because they are producing food. Worms, they are consuming the plants for the very first time, so they are the primary consumer. These primary consumers are consumed by the hen and frog, so they are the secondary consumer. And that's how, student, you can see that the secondary and the tertiary type of consumers are there, or the to the next level we can say that a quaternary consumer, depending upon the level. Okay, so that's how, students, series of organisms depending upon each other for their food survival. For the flow of energy, we call it as food chain. And when the food chain gets interconnected with each other, then we call it as the food web. Okay. So, student, if you notice here that hen is depending upon the both type of source, plant source as well, because grains come from where? Plants only. And the earthworm, they are the type of organism that we consider as the animal source. So, the hen, you can consider here that it is a type of the organism which is depending upon the food energy of both type of source, like the plant source as well as the animal source. That's why we call them as the omnivores. Okay. So, students, in this food chain, if you notice here that the eagle is the, you can say that the highest level. That means at that point, no any other organism is going to consume this eagle. Okay. So, such type of consumers are called as the apex consumer or the predators. So, consumers with few to no predators of their own residing at the top of their food chain, that we called as the apex consumer. Fine, students? Exactly. Decomposers. So, student, it's like that different food chains are there. It's not like that only one type of food chain is there are different type of many food chain are there, but it's just that it will be having the same kind of mechanism. How you will say that, ma'am, how we are getting the same kind of mechanism? So it's just that, student, the driving force will be sun. That means sun is producing that sunlight, and the sunlight is consuming by the plants so that they can produce food. So the plants will be the producer in each and every food chain. Now, the plants producing food, or they are just eaten up by the herbivores kind of animal, and those herbivores are eaten up by any other animal. So that's how, student, the food chain is getting interconnected with each other. Fine. So that's how we are getting primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. But at the very highest point of the food chain, we are getting one type of organism that we called as the apex consumer, because for them we are not having any other type of animal so that they can consume it. But it's just that, student, what happened to those apex consumer? So what happens, student, when those apex consumer died? So those apex consumers are decomposed by the decomposers. That means those decomposers decompose the dead part of that organism and convert that organic matter into the simpler form. And that simpler form again mix up into the soil, and that soil is used by the plants to grow. Exactly. So that's how student the whole process goes on. And that is how student, when we see that the series of organisms depending on each other, and they are transferring the energy from one organism to the another organism, that is called as the food chain. And when the food chain get interconnected with each other, so we call it as the food web. Fine. So I hope you got the idea, like exactly what is the food chain and the food web. So that's the whole point about food chain and food web. Now coming to the very last topic of our today's session, that is the apiculture. So now what is the apiculture? So it is a scientific word which we use for the rearing of honeybees. That means if we are rearing honeybees, so what we are getting from them? We are getting the honey. So you can say, student, that the process for the extraction of honey, so that we call it as the apiculture. The word apiculture comes from Latin word apis, meaning bee. Okay, so that means bee culture or the rearing of the honeybees, so that we can get honey from it. And how we are getting it? So we can see here. So I'm going to show you this video. So just look at it carefully. So students, you can see here that the honey is very important. Why it is important? Because students, like if you compare the amount of honey with the amount of the milk or the egg, so they are like, if you say that the 200 gram of honey having all those of nutrients which is contained by the 1.5 like the 1.5, sorry, actually. Sorry for that. So it's like 200 gram of honey is having all of those nutrients which is contained by the 1.5 liter of milk. So that means, student, honey is having each and every type of nutrient that we are getting from the food, which is important for us. So that's how honey is very important. And how we are getting honey? So we are getting it from the honeybees. So honeybees are, you can say that they are consuming the sweet part of the, that you can say that the nectar part of the plant, which is sweet in nature, and that's how they produce honey. Okay. That means they're having all of the nutrients. So, student, if you have noticed that always there is a group of bees, that they don't that they don't live separately. They always live in a group that we called as the swarms. How? So, see here. So, student, that the artificial hives which was made by the people so that we can take the honey from them. So that's how, student, those artificial hives are called as the apiary. That's why we call it as the apiculture. Fine. So how it is going on? So, students, you can see here that honey consists of sugar, mineral, water, and many enzymes, which is very, very important for our body. That's why, student, honey is you can say, a healthy food source for us. So, student, if you have noticed that because of that apiculture, that means we have to rear honeybees, and for that we have to make what? We have to make artificial hives, because they require hives for their survival, because they hives are the kind of the home for them. Exactly. Like we human beings are having homes. So similarly, honeybees are also having their home, which we called as the hives. But the artificial hives are called as the apiaries. That is why we call this process as apiculture. And from that apiaries, we collect that honeybee. And if you have noticed that the honeybee is having lots of nutrients, if you compare it with the milk, meat, eggs, which all are a very important food source for us. Exactly. So similarly, student honeybees are having all of these things, and even though enzymes which are present in honey, that is good for the digestion of the food, and they are also used as the antiseptic. So that is how student honey is very important for us, and we are getting it from the apiculture. So this is all about apiculture. Fine. So after that, student, we are going to discuss some of the questions here. So name two sugar producing plants that which produce sugar. So one is the sugarcane and one is the sugar beet. Exactly, sugarcane. We know that even though we used to drink juice of sugarcane, and I like it very much. So that's the whole point. Now, what is honey? Why is its importance? So obviously, we have seen this thing that the honey is a mixture of what? Honey consists of water, sugar, minerals, and enzymes, and it's like that it is easily digestible, and it is used in medicines as an antiseptic, which destroy the growth of microorganism. A sweet substance, liquid prepared by the bees from the nectar, that is the sweet juice collected from flowers, is called as honey. So what is honey? Honey is a kind of the liquid substance which is prepared by the bees, and how they are preparing it, they are taking the nectar or the sweet juice part from the flowers, and that honey consists of water, sugar, enzymes, and minerals, and that enzymes are used for the digestion process for our food. Exactly. And the honey can also be used as a medicine in an antiseptic, as an antiseptic, sorry. So because they destroy the growth of organism, microorganism. Fine. Now the question 3 comes here, that defines scavengers and parasites with examples. So scavengers are what, student? If you remember easily, that the scavengers are the type of organisms which are carnivores or omnivores in nature, because they eat the dead animals. Okay. They help in cleaning our surrounding, because what happens, student, that if you notice one thing, that the apex consumers are generally the scavengers only. That means if they are dying, so there is no any other, or like you can say here, see here, student, that they are the highest pride, like you can say that they present at the highest level of the food chain. So they help us to clean the surrounding. Fine. How surrounding? Because for example, if any lion died, now how to like the even though that it can undergo the decomposition process, but the decomposition of it will be a long process. So to clean, like to keep the surrounding clear, we are having apex consumer, or we can say that we are having scavengers, because they survive only on the dead organism. So that's how they are used up for the cleaning of our environment. That is, you can say some of the examples: crow, jackal, and that's how we are having examples. Okay. Now we will look at the parasites. So student, parasites are those type of animals which are very small in nature, firstly. Okay. And they, you can say either they're depending on the other organisms, or you can say that they are residing on that particular organism for their food. For example, leeches, you can say, student, even though the sometimes in our hair we are having leeches, so that means those leeches are getting food from your body. How they are getting, so that's not the whole point here, but they are taking food from your body. So these are the very small animals which live on or inside the other animals and get their food from them. So those organisms are called as the parasites. For example, fleas, leeches, mosquitoes, and bed bugs. So that are the parasites and the scavengers. Fine, students. Now, okay, that means after that we have completed with our questions. So students, that means we have completed with our session. We have covered up all of the topics which we have to cover in the today's session. We have discussed question. Now what the main thing is, you have to watch the video with the great attention, and it's just that if you're having any doubt, any question is there, you can post your question or your doubt on the public or private forum of Ask IITians, and you will be getting answer from the expert side definitely. So, till then, study well and watch the session carefully. And in the very last, thank you so much for watching the session and keep learning from Ask IITians. Thank you.